from Unit team, who's going to be leading this session. So really excited to have all of you here today, and over to you, Zach.
Thank you. I was under the impression that Alex was leading it today, and that I was just going to be hosting with him. So let me check with Alex.
Okay, so Alex is here as well. So I've just made Alex a co-host. So
Yes.
Alex.
Yes, indeed.
Perfect. What I would love to do.
Muted, so I couldn't intercept, but yes, indeed, I'm leading the session.
No problem.
Just
Alex, before we get started, can I just give you a nice introduction?
yes, of course.
Awesome. So first of all, I just want to say it's wonderful to see so many people here at Unit Masters. Really excited for those of you who are starting your journey and for those of you who are continuing your journey. And I just want to say, Alex, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your knowledge and experience. Alexandros is the Partnership and Grants Manager of Unit Masters and a Marketing Manager of Blockchain Netherlands Foundation. He has a Bachelor's in International Business Management and is currently pursuing a Master's in Blockchain and Digital Currency. Furthermore, he holds the Chartered Blockchain Expert Certificate, and his professional background is in PR, marketing, event organization, and open and public blockchains. And Alexandros was drawn to cryptocurrency because he values, like many of us, individualism, freedom, financial inclusivity, and censorship-resistant apolitical money. He hopes by using this technology, he can help build a better financial world that is more inclusive and accessible to everyone. So, Alexandros, thank you so much for being here this morning, and I'll let you take it away. I did want to ask you, as we go through today, do you prefer to take questions at the end or throughout?
How I have made it, it's basically, I think we're going to go through, because, we're going to cover the whole ecosystem and everything. Ecosystems and everything. I have prepared, let's say, different categories of ecosystems and players, let's say, within the blockchain ecosystem. So I'm going to go, let's say, one by one, the ones that I have prepared. And after each, let's say, ecosystem that we cover, maybe we can have a small pause for a few questions, then we can continue with the other category and so forth.
That sounds great. So to everyone listening, if you have comments or questions, please just put them into the chat, and then I'll have a chance to introduce those to Alex.
Indeed. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. As Zach said, it's wonderful to have you. So I'm going to start. Let me share my screen. Normally, I prepare, let's say, how do you call it? Presentation for these kinds of things, a short one. But this one, I'd rather, as I said, have people, go through. We'll go through all, let's say, the different ecosystems, like you see here, exchanges, token explorers, layer ones, layer twos, decentralized exchanges, borrowing protocols, decentralized science a little bit. I will explain what all these things are, of course, NFT marketplaces, stablecoins, and then we will also have questions in between. So as you all know, we have like different ecosystems, different things. Let's say we have the centralized ecosystem, which are exchanges, token explorers, which is basically people managing the exchange, the business. Like, for instance, Binance, one of them is Binance.com, other one is, well, before I start giving questions, names and everything, I maybe should also make entirely clear that we're not sponsored by any of these organizations. The names that I'm calling are just strictly for educational purposes, basically, right? So exchanges, you have the three main exchanges are Binance.com. We can also go and how do you call it? Visit their website. Binance.com basically is one of them. You also have Coinbase, and you have as well Kraken. These are the three main exchanges. And Kraken and Coinbase are the oldest exchanges, but they're the two oldest, I think. Binance is a bit younger than one, but they are the biggest ones. And when it comes to exchanges, I would suggest you use these three because they are the most reliable ones. They haven't in terms of security, but in terms of how to let's say, how to research which exchange suits you best, you can go basically on coingecko.com. This is a token explorer, let's say. And what you're basically doing on a token explorer, you can see, of course, here all the different currencies, the different tokens and everything. And here you have exchanges, you have crypto exchanges, and you have decentralized exchanges. If you go on crypto exchanges, here you see a number of exchanges, Coinbase, as I said, OKX, Gate.io, Huobi, and so forth, Binance. And you can see here, first of all, the trust score that they have, 10 out of 10. So I would, well, if I would basically go use any of them, I would use the one that has a trust score 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 at the very least, right? Depending on which coins they're, let's say, they're offering to their customers, but as well, but you also have to look at the fees, because each exchange has different fees whenever you send, whenever you buy something, whenever you send money to someone, you pay a small fee to the exchange. So these fees vary. So you can also look at this. You can also look at the liquidity of each exchange, let's say, when it comes to a certain coin that you would like to buy or sell. The liquidity is basically how much money the exchange has when it comes to that particular token, right? Or currency that you would like to sell. This is another thing that you could also, of course, see. And other things that you can also see if you want to use, if you would like to use an exchange that is perhaps not as well known as these ones, of course, with a 9, someone that, let's say, for instance, let's go to BNS. Please don't go here, it's just, or Bitso. These are just like, you know, examples that I'm giving basically. If you would like to go for Bitso, basically, what you can, or a lay token or any of these ones, you can always go and Google and say, well, you can Google and see, like, is Bitso a trusted exchange on Reddit, on Quora? These are sites where you basically can, forum sites where you can basically ask a question, people answer, and you can research it from that perspective as well if you do not know the exchange. Although I would not, if the coin that I would like to buy for whatever reason, let's say, would be available in other exchanges, I would basically go to the most trusted exchange instead of going out of the path, out of the, let's say, known path already, right? Then you have token explorers. So one of them is, as I said, CoinGecko. Here you can basically see all the different tokens and currencies there are, from Bitcoin to Ethereum and everything. You can see new coin listers, gainers, losers, and everything. You can see, as I said here, exchanges. You can see decentralized exchanges, which we will also cover, well, now in a few minutes. And another one is as well Coin Market Cap. Now, both of them are very trusted, let's say, coin websites in terms of finding information for the for each token. The only difference is that, of course, sometimes one of them is faster to add information than the other one. So it is always, let's say, what I'm doing as well is when one of the things that I'm doing is when, let's say, I would like to get an information on the token economics of a let's say, token, besides, of course, the website of the team and the token, you can also go and see, you can click, let's say, on Bitcoin, for instance, and you can see different things like more info. And well, Bitcoin might not be the yep, here basically you can see what is Bitcoin, right? And it kind of gives you a very basic information of what Bitcoin is, or whatever token basically as well, right? So this is also a way, this is not in any way a replacement for going on the website and seeing also, like, what the project is and everything, of course, as well, right? And what they're trying to accomplish. This is just for a very basic view of what a certain token or currency basically represents, right? And you can basically see as well the circulating supply here, the market capitalization. So you kind of get a very basic understanding of what this token basically is. And as I said, what I would basically do as well is go both of these websites. Let's say if I would like to see information for Bitcoin, instead of using only CoinMarketCap, I would use both of them to get the best information basically possible as well. Then you have also layer ones and layer twos, and what layer ones and layer twos are, right? So you have, let's say Ethereum is a layer one blockchain, where basically it's basically the infrastructure in order to build smart contracts, right? So you can basically build decentralized exchanges on Ethereum. You can build decentralized autonomous organizations, and Ethereum itself as an infrastructure is basically a layer one. And then you have layer twos, which are basically, for instance, on Ethereum, this is Polygon. And what a layer two does is basically helps scale, let's say, and address certain problems that a layer one blockchain might have, for instance, right? So they kind of are more or less, let's say, in some ways you could say that they're friends, or basically they complement one another in terms of problems that they solve. And basically the biggest problem that blockchains do have is what is called the blockchain trilemma, right? This is decentralization.
Alex, I would love, before we go even further, I have a couple of questions just about the exchanges and some of the token explorers, right? So when you talk about an exchange, it's a place where we can buy and sell cryptocurrency, right? And I'm wondering how that relates to wallets, that some exchanges allow you to store that currency, some are custodians, some...
Oh, that's a very good question.
Yeah, could you talk just a little bit about that?
Yes, indeed. So certain exchanges, for instance, Coinbase, they have also their own non-custodial, let's say, wallet, which is Coinbase wallet, right? If you go on the, let's say, well, if you go here and you kind of write Coinbase wallet, it should come up. And basically you can download it, right? You can see basically you have it here. And the difference between, of course, what Zach basically also is saying between Coinbase wallet and Coinbase itself is that with Coinbase, Coinbase, think of it a bit like a crypto bank, right? Like you go to your bank wherever in your country you are, basically, and you can get money out of it or deposit money besides other services, right? But let's say the basic one is to take money and deposit money. It's the very same thing with Coinbase. You can get cryptocurrencies, buy cryptocurrencies from it, and store cryptocurrencies there as well. And the difference between these two is that Coinbase itself, the company, stores the money for you, which basically means that you get exposed to a risk that if Coinbase, God forbid, for instance, gets hacked for whatever reason, you are at risk that your money may have been stolen, basically, right? With Coinbase wallet or any other, let's say, wallet, that could be MetaMask, that could be Exodus. This is basically wallets like this one. They can be mobile wallets, they can be browser wallets. For instance, I'm also using Exodus wallet here. It's a new wallet that I actually added. You can see here that's, well, how it basically more or less is. And what I would also suggest for you as well is, as you can see here, I do not add normally a lot of money in this kind of exchange, in this kind of wallet as well, because you're still exposed to certain risks. For instance, if someone gets, because your 12, we already talked about the 12 key phrase last week, right? So if someone kind of finds it because you create it online. And when you create it online, there are different things that I can do to basically access that. This is basically to create a website that may be, how do you call it? That can be fake or a scam, and it would ask, and if I do not realize that it's a fake or a scam, I can connect my wallet, and depending on what they have programmed it with, they can basically get access to my wallet, right? So with having just $16 here, what happens is if I connect to a, how do you call it, to a scam website, I'm only going to lose these 16 wallets. The most of my cryptocurrencies I have on my ledger here. I'm not going to click on it or anything, but basically with a ledger, as we said also last week, the keys are generated offline, and your private key is also online, and there is no way, unless you give it yourself to someone, for someone to get it from you basically and steal your funds. Is this what you is this what you meant, Zach?
Yeah, I just wanted to go into a little bit more. One, that sometimes people like Coinbase, you can buy and sell crypto and keep it right on the exchange, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which, as Alex said, that's centralized, and they're kind of holding it for you, right? You have the ability to move your money around or to watch it, but if they were to get hacked, they're actually holding your money, which means people could steal it, right? Then you also have like external wallets where you could send money from your exchange to your wallet, right? And that's kind of like having like an ATM card, right? And again, if somebody gets hold of your ATM card, there's a possibility that they could get into your account and send money somewhere else. And then I think when I think about a cold wallet, now I'm thinking about something similar to like a safe deposit box where only I have the key to, right? So nobody can get in there unless they have my key, right? So again, I know for some of you that this may be new, but just thinking about there's different ways that have different levels of security with your funds. And I also just want to say, like the CoinMarketCap or some of the other sites that Alex brought up, I know like when I first went on, I looked at it and there were like all these numbers and these graphs, and it didn't seem very user-friendly. But I would almost think of it like the way we have nutrition facts on the back of food, right? That now we're very familiar with that, and we go on and we know what our carbohydrates are, and we know what protein is, and we look for how many sugars or different kinds of fats. And that with time, just by going on these sites and kind of looking at different things, it'll become the exact same. And you'll start to go, oh, that's the circulating supply. This is the market. This is how much trading's happened in the last 24 hours. So I just want to let you know that all of that is going to become second nature as you go on this crypto journey.
Exactly.
Awesome.
But also make sure that you do not only look at these, let's say when it comes to researching, do not just go on CoinMarketCap. You see a project that you may like, you see kind of this basic information, and you decide to join the community. Go on Discord as well, look at the website of the, let's say, project, look if they have a Discord server, if they have a Telegram group, look if they have kind of how many people are there, if they're active. Also try to be active yourself, because many sometimes what can happen is that they can kind of get a Telegram group, fill it with bots, and then you basically think that you're in a community, but you're basically not in a community. It's basically a scam. So another thing that you should do is try to be a little bit active and see if different people will reply to you. Look at the chat if people speak with one another. When they speak, if their speech when they write is actually human as well, like, if they're basically asking logical questions, someone else answers like a human, let's say. These are other things that you should also, of course, look at. And also at the same time look at the white paper, of course, of the projects or of the community that you would like to join. Look at what their aim is, what they're trying to solve, what kind of community they would like to build. And at the same time, of course, as well, try and see if, let's say, what also other people say about this project, not YouTubers, because many of them getting paid, but let's say if you have friends, let's say, or anything, you can also ask them if they know this project, if they what they kind of think about it. You can also make research yourself as well, these kinds of things. Well,
there's a question here.
Yes, that's what I wanted to ask. Let's go for questions for the moment.
Yeah.
Then we can continue as well.
So Tia is asking, can you transfer your crypto from something like Robinhood or Uphold to your Ledger wallet?
Robinhood. Well, that's a good question. I've never used Robinhood myself, but I think, have you used it, Zach? Because I haven't used it. Like
I have not, but usually on any of these sites, there'll be some kind of like transfer function. And if it asks you for your wallet, then the answer is yes. And you'll be able to send those funds around, but I'm not familiar with Robinhood, so I'd have to look into that.
Yes, indeed. So,
and then
another thing is you should also be, well, I'm not talking about Robinhood because it's a real business, but if they do not have a transfer function where you can basically take your money and own it, sorry, I'm a little bit sick. Then basically what happens is that you run the risk that you're basically in a kind of a scammy exchange that does not let you take your money, basically, because once you deposit money, they kind of take your money. Any other questions that are
Yeah. And I want to say also, I just noticed that Sawadi actually answered Tia saying you would have to check with Robinhood to see if they allow transfers. In the past, they didn't, but things may have changed. So thank you. First of all, I love when the community answers each other's questions and we share knowledge. And I recognize that there are some people in this room that probably have been in the industry for years and have lots of experience. So we appreciate you for sharing your knowledge. So one other question, it says, Alexandros, how do you feel about DCA, dollar cost averaging, with Coinbase, even in these times of a volatile market? Would you change the dates of how you schedule your deductions based on the market, even though you can't tell exactly if the market will go up or down?
That's a good question, but well, I would rather not, like, I'm going to answer your question, but of course, at the same time, at Unit, the idea is not to basically, it's not an investing kind of course. It's more like for you to understand how the ecosystem works, where you can buy tokens and everything. But to answer your question specifically, I would say dollar cost averaging is probably the least, well, depending on how much you dollar cost average, of course, as well. If you put all your money in one coin, then of course that's not the most sensible thing to do. But I suppose dollar cost averaging is one of the safest ways for you, as long as it's also safe. Well, safe for crypto standards coin, like let's say Ethereum, like Bitcoin, because although also they fluctuate, I really doubt that they're going away. Does that answer your question?
I think so. And there's been some other people who have posted also. There's one more question here from Mati, who says, can you trade on the market with a cold wallet?
Trades in what way do you mean? Like buy, well, certain cold wallets, let's say Ledger, they kind of have built, well, it depends on the wallet, but the one that I'm using, Ledger, they kind of have a built-in system where you can use Binance if you have an account and buy crypto directly through Ledger instead of going on Binance. So yes, if that's what you mean by trading, buying currencies, then yes, that's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point, that some wallets will actually allow you to buy and sell from within the wallet. But let's keep moving.
Indeed. So
you were talking about like layer ones and layer twos.
Yes, layer ones and layer twos. And as I was saying, Ethereum is basically a layer one solution. which means it's the infrastructure for blockchains for Web3, meaning that think of it a bit like roads, right? Roads is the infrastructure, and then you have cars being built and running on top of the road, right? So layer ones are, let's say, the roads of blockchains of Web3, the infrastructure, and people can build different decentralized exchanges, decentralized services, let's say borrowing protocols, decentralized autonomous organizations that run on top, just like cars. People can use them as well. Layer twos are, let's say, well, one of the things that Ethereum has as a problem is that it has a very slow processing power in terms of how do you call it, transactions, right? I think it's do you remember by heart, Zach, how what is the transaction speed of Ethereum? I think 10 transactions per second or something like this, 15.
It's pretty low.
Yes, indeed. So imagine you have only 15 transactions per second and you're relying that the whole world could use Ethereum, right? For to basically compare that with Visa, for instance. Visa has 20,000 transactions per second, right? So layer twos, for instance, like as I said, Polygon in Ethereum's case, it's basically a layer on top, sort of like, think of it a bit. You have the car road, the road where cars would go. This is basically Ethereum, and then Polygon would be kind of like the layer on top that would be that would basically sort of like, think of it a bit like painting maybe like the road so that cars could basically see whenever to stop and how do you call it, allow people to pass, let's say, and these kinds of things. Like, you know, on the road you kind of have the different paintings, of course, as well.
Yeah.
And it kind of helps with the whole structure. In this case, it helps with scaling the transaction per second of
Right.
Ethereum. But generally speaking, blockchains have, you know, so what is called the blockchain trilemma. And we can kind of see it here. It's decentralization, scalability, and security. This basically means that every single time, at best, each blockchain can accommodate just 2 of the 3, let's say, requirements, right? You can be decentralized and scalable, but then you would not be secure. This means that the blockchain could be hacked, right? You could be secure and scalable, but then you would not be decentralized. Secure and scalable, one of them is the BNB Smart Chain. This is from Binance, basically. They're not decentralized, but they're scalable and secure. So you can basically do a lot of transactions in a secure way, but they're not decentralized. They're managed by Binance and the organizations that have partnered with Binance, right?
Yeah.
Now you also have, you can also be perhaps, you know, decentralized and secure, but then you would not have scalability. This is basically Bitcoin's case, right? Bitcoin is the most decentralized for the moment currency. It is decentralized and secure, but it's not scalable because it has the least scalability in, let's say, in the whole space.
Yeah. Alex, can I jump in for a sec?
Yes.
I think it's useful to think about like some real world cases, right? Even hypothetical. So for example, if I was trying to come up with a rewards and pay program for Starbucks, for example, so they're selling millions of coffees every morning, right? So Ethereum is not really going to work for them just because it can't keep up with the amount of transactions that they would have, right? Now in Starbucks' case, if you're only paying $5 for coffee, they may not be so worried about security. Like, who's going to hack you for $5? right? So for them, it might be great to go with a blockchain or even a layer 2 that is going to allow them just to process all of those payments every morning, right? Whereas, for example, if I were selling real estate, say NFTs, right? So people are literally going to be putting down hundreds of thousands of dollars. For me, probably the most important thing is security, right? So I might go with something like Bitcoin, and maybe it's even more expensive for those transactions, but I'm willing to pay that to know that my money is secure, right? So as you start to think about blockchains, going back to the car kind of analogy that Alex brought up, I think about it, our first blockchain was kind of built for everything. And imagine a car that's built that you want to be able to do the Indy 500, and you also want to be able to go to the mountains in the snow and go skiing. And by trying to build a car that does everything, it probably isn't good at anything, right? And now what we're starting to see is people are developing blockchains for specific uses, for specific cases, right? Which means they're probably going to be limited in what they can do, but they might be very good at what they do, right? And then what you're seeing, I think, a lot also is people, for example, with Bitcoin that are saying, well, we want Bitcoin to be a currency, not just a store of value. So there are people that are developing layer 2s to try and solve those problems, right? How to increase the number of transactions per second while still maintaining that security level, right? So it's good just to think about what is the purpose, and then you can think about what blockchain might actually be best for that. Back to you, Alex.
That's a very good example, Zach. And also basically kind of also, well, in your example of Bitcoin's layer 2, in order for it to scale, is called the Lightning Network as well.
Mm-hmm.
It depends. Well, you can basically Google afterwards and see how Polygon as a layer 2 is trying to perhaps tackle Ethereum scalability problems and how Lightning Network does this and what are the trade-offs between the two, right? Because there are trade-offs to be made, of course, as well. Well, that's basically in terms of layer 1s and layer 2s. Then you also have decentralized exchanges. And we're going now to basically go, let me share my screen again and explore some of them. One of them, you probably, people who have been in the space a little bit will probably know Uniswap. This is built on Ethereum. As a decentralized exchange, in terms of the difference between a decentralized and centralized exchange is that in a centralized exchange, it's basically like a bank. As I said, you have the employees and everything. And a decentralized exchange, it's more like, it's basically decentralized and no one manages it. Think of it a bit like a code, and it's basically self-executing as a smart contract, right? So we can go to launch up here in terms of Uniswap, and here you can see, for instance, that people, you can take Ethereum, and just like in a centralized exchange, you can select another token, let's say Aave, and you can say, I want to exchange 10 apologies, 10 Ethereum for Aave. You kind of also see the difference here in dollars. 10 Ethereum would be this much, and you would get 196 Aave, right? Then you connect your wallet if you would like to do that. You sign it and you do it, and the transaction basically takes place, which is very similar to centralized exchange, as I said, but the difference is that no one is managing it in the background, and basically they cannot. You kind of basically do it peer-to-peer, right? So in some ways, someone can also, let's say, deposit money here and kind of get, you kind of get to be able to trade with someone, let's say, from Japan and someone from the United States, really different time zones, different scales in terms of geography, and you kind of do it without an intermediary, because with Coinbase, as I gave as an example before, you kind of have an intermediary executing basically the transaction. Here, there is no intermediary, it's just a website where you can basically say, okay, I want to do this in this trade, connect my wallet, and to, how do you call it? To execute the trade. Are there any questions about this?
I have two questions for you, Alex.
Yes, Tim.
One, as I understand this, the value is being locked in a smart contract as opposed to being held in someone's account, right?
Exactly.
If you could just kind of mention, how does that work?
Think of it a little bit like a computer program, or a kind of like a contract, where basically what happens is you kind of go and deposit the tokens, right? Someone can come and deposit tokens in the smart contract, and someone basically sort of like a liquidity. And whenever someone comes and does, let's say, certain trades, there is a certain, let's say, fee that the person that has deposited the money gets as a reward for that. Is this what you, does that answer the question, Zach?
Yeah, and I have one other question, just because I'm trying to understand the difference between the centralization and decentralization. So Coinbase could obviously bar me or not allow me to have an account or freeze my account. Is that something that could also happen on Uniswap?
That is also a good question, Zach. Basically, on a decentralized exchange, you cannot be well, your funds cannot be frozen, and no one can basically bar you from using it.
Okay.
So this is another thing. Let's say for whatever reason, let's say Coinbase goes bankrupt, or kind of freezes your money for whatever reason, because, well, let's say, I'll give you, for instance, an example of a real life example, like, for instance, with the truckers protests in Canada. Basically, what happened is that the government decided to freeze the bank accounts of the protesters, right? Now, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. You can decide for yourself. This is not about this is not about an ethics, let's say, class. But one of the things that happened is that people who supported the trackers, they were basically donating them money through cryptocurrencies, right? So similarly, in a way, a decentralized exchange, just like with Coinbase, if, let's say, the Canadian government goes to Coinbase and forces Coinbase to freeze the cryptocurrencies of the trackers, they will be able to do that. While a decentralized exchange will not be able to do that, because it is decentralized and not managed by people. Would that answer the question, Zach?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Any other questions that there might be?
Gina was asking for an example of a smart contract. And I was just going to post just an example. Hold on, let me send it to everyone. So smart contracts are really just, they're not actually that much code, but it's important that you get it right.
Indeed.
So I just posted in the chat just an example if people want to look at what smart contracts look like. Awesome.
Thank you, Zach. Any other questions?
Not for now.
I see.
I think it's just important. You know, everyone will go on and explore at their own times when they're ready, but it's important to understand that there is a difference between a centralized exchange and a decentralized exchange. And that's something I would look for when you see these big news articles about certain exchanges getting hacked or going down. I would really be careful to look at which ones are being hacked, which ones are mismanaging funds, right? And you'll see that most of the problems, if not all of them, are concerned with centralized entities.
Exactly.
So again, I'm hoping, I'm a big fan of decentralization, and I'm hoping that, as this industry continues to evolve, that we'll go more and more towards decentralization, which I think will be safer for all of us.
Indeed. Another basically example that can basically be, let's say, well, it's basically a decentralized autonomous organization and borrowing a lending platform. This is Aave.com. So if you launch the app here, you can see that basically what you can do is you can supply money here, let's say Binance USD, DAI, and any other, let's say, cryptocurrency, and someone in the world basically can go and borrow that from you, and you earn interest on that as well. So this is another thing that you can do with smart contracts. There are many, many, many examples that you can also perhaps research on your own, but it's a good thing to also know. And as a decentralized autonomous organization, we're going to cover them in the third week, next week, but just a brief thing. What happens is that it is governed not by a traditional organization that is, top down with a CEO, let's say, but it is governed by the people that own the Aave token, right? Because basically, you see here, it kind of says also how it works. You submit a request with your idea, and people can vote afterwards whether they would like to see this change in the organization or not. It's here in the governance, but we're going to go through this next week. But just keep in mind that this is something that exists as well.
There's another question from Rahul, who says, with all the regulations coming in, will the government try to push decentralized exchanges to be regulated also? And I guess this is an opinion.
That's a good question. So that's a good question, because for instance, I'm in the European Union, so I mostly know about the European Union. We have the MiCA coming out in 1 to 2 years that will take effect. They said at the beginning of 2024 it will come into effect. Now they kind of postponed it, so I'm not sure exactly when it will take place. But this MiCA will basically regulate centralized exchanges like Coinbase, like Binance, to make sure that they do not deal in frauds and other such things. In terms of decentralized exchanges, at least in the European Union, they have been talking about MiCA 2, which will take into consideration decentralized exchanges. But other than that, we do not really have any other information for the moment. But it depends on how they would like to regulate it, because in my view, there are two ways that you could regulate it. Both of them are very, let's say, intrusive. One of them is to do KYC on the front end. So basically, when you go on Aave.com, they could basically ask you your identity card, or they could regulate how people write smart contracts, right? But the problem with decentralized finance in terms of regulation is that on Ethereum, for instance, you can fork, let's say, you can fork Aave. This means create a copy of Aave, which is basically the same like the original Aave, but basically does not ask for KYC, for instance, right? Which that would mean that it is illegal to do so, but there is no one stopping someone to do that, right? And then basically the authorities would have to look basically a little bit, for these websites and shut them down. Think of it a bit like piracy, right? When you pirate a movie or something, it is illegal, and and when authorities find such a website, they shut it down, but they always find a way to come back with another website. If it's not .org, let's say, it's .xyz or something like this. So it is very tricky because you could regulate the main ones, but you would never be able to, I think, keep up with the forks, right? Because these copies can be created by let's say, someone in the United States that is not subject to regulation from the European Union, right? So it's a very tricky situation from that perspective. Does that answer the question?
Yes. I also want to be mindful that we have, I think, 12 minutes to go for the hour.
Yes,
and there's still stuff to go through. So let's hold questions for a second and you can just kind of continue the presentation.
indeed. NFT marketplaces, this is basically marketplaces that you can get, that you can buy NFTs. One of them is OpenSea. You can basically look at the collections that you can kind of see here, or you can say, for instance, one of them, Boards, Ape, Yacht Club, which is one of the well-known ones, right? You kind of can see it here, and you can buy one of them if you kind of have the money for that, 69 ETH. Or you can basically also mint your own NFTs here, and you can kind of can explore it in many ways as well. The ways that you could basically mint an NFT is you connect your wallets, and there is basically let's say button that you press to mint NFTs, and you add a collection. You add you add the name of the collection, how many pieces, certain characteristics of the collection, and it gets minted basically. And other, let's say, alternatives to OpenSea is Super Rare. I just don't remember if it is, no, not Super Pair. Super Rare, right? Yeah, I didn't remember if it was .com or .io, but superrare.com. You can basically, well, do the very same thing. You can go and let's say there are different categories, of course, as well, but you can also add your own one, let's say with photography. And you can kind of see, I don't know what these photographs are for, but let's say you kind of can see which ones you would like to buy if you would like to, and you buy it. Alternatively, you can mint your own NFTs as well. That's as well. On Polkadot, there is also Unique, basically. This is built on Polkadot, Unique network. Here, basically, as well. But as far as I know, they have not launched 100% yet, but it's another NFT marketplace built on Polkadot instead of Ethereum, and it is good to know, of course, as well. Then you also have stablecoins. Let's say DAI stablecoin is one of them. What stablecoins basically are basically, how do you call it? There are different kinds of stablecoins and how basically they work. But the very basic thing is that a stablecoin, it's a cryptocurrency pegged to another currency or to another asset. So think of it a little bit like DAI is pegged to the US dollar. So what basically happens is someone buys United States dollars, they kind of buy, let's say, $10, and they can create 10 DAI out of them, right? Because they kind of are pegged, or USDD as well, right? I think USDD is a better example for that. So they kind of buy $10, and they create 10 Tether, 10 USDD dollars, and they peg it. So this means that if you go theoretically to the business, which is basically who basically manages USDD, and you give them the cryptocurrency, if you send them the cryptocurrency, they should be able to give you physical dollars. And the very same thing goes with gold, for instance. You can create, I think they have USDG. I think so, right? No, I don't remember how it is called, but USDD has its own stablecoin pegged to gold. And this means that one USDG, I think, or how it is called, it basically, they kind of take a nonce of gold and you peg it to the cryptocurrency. So whenever if you would go again to the business and it would give them the cryptocurrency pegged to gold, they would give you physical gold back. This is basically how it works. And then you also have decentralized science, which is basically decentralized autonomous organizations that facilitate the research of science and facilitation of science. And it kind of helps, for instance, you can also go and write decentralized science Ethereum Foundation if you would like to and read a little bit more about it, but you can also go and say landscape, for instance, right? You can go and see certain decentralized autonomous organizations. One of my favorites is, of course, as well, VitaDAO, which I made a small post on my LinkedIn about. They kind of, what they do is they give grants to scientists to research or build certain scientific products to advance longevity in life. This is done by doctors and by different, let's say, scientists. And what happens is they kind of give them, depending, it doesn't matter that much where you are in the world, because, you know, it's decentralized, and when you send someone the money, they kind of get them in a few seconds. But what they do is they fund the project as a decentralized autonomous organization, a science project. And in return, they get a certain percentage of the rights of the final product of the research, which they have, let's say, with the scientist himself. So they kind of ask, okay, we're going to fund you $100,000, let's say, to build a camera that may be able to go inside the body, let's say, of animals, and being able to kind of diagnose what problems they may have, right? So they kind of build this, and then they kind of have percentage ownership of the rights for the camera. So something like maybe 50-50 with the scientist, or it can be also negotiated, of course, as well. But this is also another really interesting field that is being really quickly, you know, taking place and is being expanded as well. We still have 5 minutes. I really went really quickly with every single thing that we still basically had. Are there any questions, whether it's about stablecoins or decentralized science or something else?
I have a question.
Tell me, Zachar.
When we talk about stablecoins, it
Yep.
means that the value is pegged to something. But
Yes.
does it mean that those stablecoins are backed up by real assets?
Define real assets.
Like, for example, dollars deposited against the stablecoin or gold deposited. Like I know, for example, in the US, the dollar until 1971 was backed 1-to-1 with gold, and then they depegged it, and
Yes,
now we
exactly. It is. Well, I think what you're basically saying is, well, it's basically the correct thing as well, right? So basically it is backed 1-to-1 to dollars or to a certain percentage of gold or silver, right? This helps because normally if you would like to use or pay someone with gold, or to let's say take gold and transport it somewhere, it is very heavy, right? As an asset, you will not be able to do that by yourself. But if you create a cryptocurrency that is pegged, let's say you have 1 bar of gold, right? You can create a cryptocurrency that is pegged 1-to-1 to one of these bars of gold. And you can say, instead of transporting the bar of gold, there is this cryptocurrency that represents this bar of gold, and people can buy it and trade with it. Well, 1 bar of gold, right? But you can have plenty of them. This is just an example. Does that answer the question, Zach?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
We can go. We can dive more. Well, I'm just wondering, like, it appears that not all stablecoins are backed directly with something, right? So when I'm minting a stablecoin,
there are also a good, yes, that's a good thing to know. Also, there are different kind of stable coins. There is also what are called algorithmic stable coins, right? These stable coins are basically programmed in such a way that they resemble a one-to-one theoretically peg to a dollar or to an asset. But instead of having an asset that people can trade it for, there is a program that has been programmed to buy and sell the stable coin to keep the, how do you call it? To keep the price stable. I basically gave you the example of the pegged stable coins because they are the most stable ones, because what happens with algorithmic stable coins is that they're not, because they're not physically pegged with something, and you have let's say a program buying and selling to keep the price stable, they're not as stable as let's say USD, USDC, and other stable coins that are basically pegged one-to-one. The difference that you would like to use as an algorithmic stablecoin to a one-to-one peg stablecoin is again the centralization. And centralization, USDC is centralized, so they can freeze your money, right? If you have USDC, let's say, and the government asks Circle, the company behind USDC, to freeze your money, they could. But with an algorithmic stablecoin, although it is not as stable, let's say, as USDC, there is no one that can basically freeze it. Would that answer the question better, Zach?
Yeah. And I would like to just point out, like, for example, like that's what happened with Terra Luna, right? Where it was an algorithmic stablecoin, which means it wasn't backed one-to-one. So when everyone goes to take out their money, it becomes unpegged. And I just want to point out that people often think this is a problem that only exists in crypto. But the US dollar, for example, is currently in the same situation, that once we unpegged it with gold, if everyone in the US today went to take out their money from the bank, the exact same thing would happen. The banks would have to close and stop. And we've seen this in other countries, like Venezuela, Argentina, Lebanon, where there aren't enough reserves one-to-one to back people's money. And so the banks end up saying you can only take out $100 a day, or if you travel, you have a limit of $2,000 that you can spend. And so just to point out that this isn't a problem just endemic to some of the cryptocurrencies, but also even to real world fiat currencies.
Exactly. Well, I'm originally from Greece, so I kind of witnessed that as well, what Zach basically said. During the financial crisis, a lot of Greek people were, terrified that the banks are going to go bankrupt. And what happened is a lot of people went to the banks to receive their money, and then the banks imposed what they called capital controls, meaning that people could apologies, each person could withdraw just a maximum amount of euros per day so that the bank itself does not go bankrupt, because as Zach said, there are not enough money in a bank. Like if everyone would go to a bank, if all the customers of a bank would go to the bank to withdraw their money, there would not be enough money for everyone to withdraw. And the bank would go bankrupt, let's say. Well, we're 2 minutes past. Maybe we could either wrap up or a last question or two.
I think we're good. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. And just thank you all for tuning in and kind of learning some more about the exchanges, the NFT platforms, the different stable coins, and everything else we've talked about today. Yeah. Alex, again, I just want to thank you. I know you're not feeling great today, but we appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge.
Well, thank you. I hope everyone learned something new today. And if you have any questions, you kind of saw on my presentation, alexandros@uni.network. If there are any other questions that you would like to ask, you can also send me an email, let's say.
Wonderful. And then I just want to remind everyone, as it is Friday, to just go on your unitmasters.org, log into your account, and just make sure that you go through, finish that quiz, apply for your certificate. I feel like while the information is fresh, is the best time to just go in and and finish it up and send it in and get your certificates. I also just want to say thank you to Joy, who I see here, as well as Vida, and other members of the unit team and unit masters. And I wish you all a great weekend.
You too, Zach. Goodbye.
Wonderful.